Lila Morgan stood in her elegantly decorated living room, her hands resting gently on her rounded belly as she took a deep breath. 8 months into her pregnancy, she could feel the baby shifting, tiny kicks that reminded her of the life growing within her. The excitement of the upcoming trip was supposed to overshadow her discomfort, a rare opportunity to escape the endless routine of doctor visits and prenatal checkups. She had meticulously planned every detail, her carry-on neatly packed with essentials for herself and the baby, a carefully selected outfit for the flight, and snacks to keep her energy steady. Everything had to be perfect, the anticipation of traveling with her husband, Nathan Pierce, and the chance to create lasting memories, filled her with warmth. Nathan Pierce, a man whose wealth and influence could move mountains, had promised her this trip as a celebration of their growing family. He was often preoccupied with board meetings, high-profile events, and media appearances, but Lila clung to the belief that when it came to her and the baby, he would always be present. Yet, as she glanced at him across the room, adjusting his cufflinks and checking his phone with a distracted expression, a flicker of unease passed through her. There were small cracks she could no longer ignore, the lingering tension during conversations, the rare sighs when she mentioned her discomfort, and a subtle distance in his gaze. Lila pushed these worries aside, reminding herself that Nathan loved her and the baby, that his attentiveness would shine through when it mattered most. For now, she focused on the joy of expectation, the quiet hope that this trip would be a milestone of happiness rather than a prelude to heartbreak. Lila Morgan wheeled herself through the polished airport terminal, the hum of announcements and rolling suitcases echoing around her. Her pregnancy made long walks exhausting, and the wheelchair was not just a convenience, it was a necessity for her comfort and safety. She had rehearsed this journey in her mind countless times, anticipating the check-in process, security, and the walk to the gate. Each step, or in her case, each push, required careful attention to avoid overexertion or sudden strain on her body. Nathan Pierce strode beside her, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders and negotiated deals. He offered a cursory glance at Lila from time to time, his focus clearly elsewhere. When she hesitated to navigate around a group of travelers, he barely noticed, muttering distractedly, "It's fine, we have time," before returning to his call. The contrast between Lila's careful, vulnerable state and Nathan's absorbed demeanor heightened her anxiety. She felt both physically exposed and emotionally sidelined, a pang of loneliness cutting through her anticipation. The terminal was crowded, travelers brushing past her, some casting sympathetic glances, others indifferent to her plight. The noise, the movement, and the sheer scale of the airport made her small and fragile in comparison. She gripped the wheelchair handles tightly, trying to maintain composure while her heart raced. Every bump on the floor reminded her of her precarious condition, every sharp turn of the wheels sending reminders of her body's limits. Lila couldn't shake the sense that something was off, that despite Nathan's presence, she was navigating this vast, chaotic space alone. The subtle tension between her trust in him and the creeping awareness of his distraction set the stage for the ordeal to come. Amid the bustling terminal, Lila Morgan's eyes caught a flash of familiarity, Vanessa Moore, impeccably dressed and exuding effortless confidence, weaving through the crowd with purposeful precision. Vanessa had a presence that commanded attention without raising suspicion, her sharp gaze scanned the area, noting every detail. Unbeknownst to Lila, Vanessa had already been coordinating with certain airport staff, ensuring her path would cross Nathan's and that her influence would remain subtle but effective. There was an aura of calculated control around Vanessa, the kind that made casual interactions feel staged and deliberate. Lila noticed small, almost imperceptible disruptions. A luggage cart slightly misplaced near their gate, a strategically timed announcement delaying their boarding, and airport personnel offering extra assistance in ways that seemed more than coincidental. Every time she glanced at Nathan, he was engrossed in his phone or conversing with an assistant, completely unaware of the orchestrated chaos surrounding them. Her heart began to tighten, not out of immediate fear, but from an intuitive sense that something was wrong, that someone was maneuvering behind the scenes with intentions she could not yet comprehend. Vanessa's eyes met Nathan's for just a fleeting moment, and though he didn't appear alarmed, there was a spark of recognition, a subtle exchange that only the two of them understood. Lila felt an unease she couldn't shake, a prickling sensation that whispered of betrayal. Though she didn't yet know the full extent of Vanessa's manipulation, the tension was palpable. In the crowded, noisy terminal, Lila was vulnerable, Nathan was distracted, and Vanessa's calculated presence hinted at the storm about to engulf them all. Lila Morgan had just paused near the check-in counter, adjusting her grip on the wheelchair handles, when Vanessa Moore appeared beside her, wearing a warm, seemingly concerned smile. "Let me help you with your luggage," Vanessa said smoothly, reaching for Lila's carry-on bags. The gesture appeared innocent enough, but in one fluid motion, Vanessa seized the wheelchair and began wheeling it away, her movements confident and deliberate. Lila's eyes widened in shock. "No! That's my wheelchair!" Lila cried, trying to reach out, but her pregnant body and weakened state made it impossible to catch up. Her legs, already strained from months of pregnancy complications, could barely push against the tiled floor. Panic surged through her veins as she realized she was suddenly immobile, entirely at the mercy of her environment. Vanessa's casual demeanor and feigned helpfulness only intensified the sense of betrayal, making Lila feel both powerless and targeted. Around them, the airport buzzed with noise, announcements, and the shuffling of travelers, none of whom seemed to notice the unfolding crisis. The chaos amplified Lila's fear, each step she attempted without the wheelchair sending pain shooting through her body. Meanwhile, Nathan Pierce was oblivious, absorbed in a heated business call on his smartphone. He waved a hand dismissively at a passing staff member, entirely unaware that his wife was struggling for basic mobility in a public, crowded space. Lila's mind raced. How could someone be so cruel? How could Nathan not see what was happening? Her pulse quickened, and her breathing became shallow, mixing panic with physical discomfort. The moment was a perfect storm of vulnerability, the wheelchair gone, Vanessa's smirk in plain view, and Nathan's inattention, a calculated betrayal that left Lila stranded, physically and emotionally, in the middle of the bustling terminal. Lila Morgan's palms scraped against the cold, unforgiving tiles of the airport floor as she began to crawl toward her gate. Each movement sent sharp pangs through her hips and back, a cruel reminder of her advanced pregnancy. Her breaths came in shallow, rapid bursts, and beads of sweat dotted her brow as she fought against the dizzying combination of pain, fear, and exhaustion. Every inch gained felt like a victory, yet the distance to the gate seemed impossibly long. Travelers bustled past, their luggage wheels clattering and conversations ringing in her ears. Some glanced down, their eyes soft with sympathy, offering brief words of encouragement or hesitant hands, but the majority moved on, absorbed in their own schedules. The anonymity of the crowded terminal heightened Lila's vulnerability, making each passing second feel heavier, more urgent. The emotional strain was as sharp as the physical, humiliation mingled with terror, but she refused to give in. She had to make it. For herself, and for the life growing inside her. Her body screamed in protest. Arms trembling, stomach pressing uncomfortably against the floor with each movement, Lila forced herself onward. Panic threatened to take over as she imagined what might happen if she collapsed entirely, but she pushed it aside. Her determination was a flickering flame in a storm of despair. With each crawl, the gate drew nearer, but time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every shuffle of luggage, every rolling suitcase, and every passerby's indifferent glance added to the suspense. Could she reach the gate before the exhaustion and pain overcame her? The terminal, once a place of excitement and anticipation, had transformed into a gauntlet of physical and emotional endurance, testing Lila's willpower and courage to the very limits. Nathan Pierce finally glanced up from his phone as he noticed a flurry of movement near the gate, his brow furrowing slightly. Across the terminal, Lila's small, desperate form crawling painfully along the floor caught his peripheral vision. For a fleeting second, a flicker of concern passed through him, but it was quickly swallowed by the chatter of his phone call and the presence of Vanessa Moore at his side. "Everything okay?" Vanessa asked, her tone almost casual, but there was a subtle edge in her eyes, ensuring Nathan's attention remained firmly on her rather than his wife. Nathan waved a dismissive hand, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's fine. Pregnant women overreact," he muttered, brushing off the urgency gnawing at the edge of his mind. His arrogance, a familiar shield, prevented him from confronting the reality of Lila's suffering. He stood there, conflicted yet unwilling to act, convinced that any display of concern would disrupt his evening and the carefully curated presence of Vanessa. The terminal, alive with hurried travelers, seemed to fade around him, the cries and struggles of his wife barely registered in his consciousness. Nathan's self-absorption allowed him to underestimate the danger, assuming Lila's slow crawl was merely discomfort rather than a life-threatening struggle. As Lila dragged herself painfully forward, Nathan's inaction spoke louder than words. His indifference, compounded by vanity and misplaced priorities, left her completely vulnerable. In that moment, the distance between husband and wife was not just physical but moral and emotional, a chasm born of selfishness, arrogance, and a shocking disregard for the very person carrying his child. Vanessa Moore's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile as she watched Nathan glance again toward the gate. She had orchestrated every subtle disruption with precision, and now she could almost taste the satisfaction of her control. "You're handling everything so well tonight," she murmured, leaning closer, her tone laced with admiration and flirtation. Nathan, eager for her approval, nodded, momentarily brushing aside the gnawing concern he might have felt for Lila. Vanessa knew exactly how to manipulate him. She praised his decisiveness, complimented his style, and hinted that any distraction, like worrying about his pregnant wife, would diminish his image, his power, and even her attention. Each word, each gesture, was calculated to ensure his gaze remained fixed on her rather than the vulnerable woman crawling through the terminal. Nathan's ego, already fragile beneath the facade of billionaire confidence, responded predictably. He straightened, smoothed his suit, and let her influence override any flicker of responsibility or compassion. Meanwhile, Lila's struggle continued unnoticed by him. Vanessa's presence was a smokescreen, a deliberate lure keeping Nathan occupied and indifferent. The betrayal was sharp and deliberate. She had inserted herself between husband and wife, ensuring Nathan's priorities were warped to serve her desires. Every subtle nudge, every coquettish glance, reinforced her power over him and deepened the chasm of neglect that left Lila crawling helplessly toward the gate. In that moment, Vanessa's manipulation was complete, her control absolute, and the weight of betrayal hanging heavily in the bustling terminal. As Lila Morgan struggled along the terminal floor, her strength waning with every painful inch, a gentle voice called out. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need some help?" A young airport attendant, noticing the unusual sight of a heavily pregnant woman crawling, rushed over. His eyes were filled with concern, and without hesitation, he knelt beside her, offering steady hands in a wheelchair that had been nearby. Lila's relief was immediate but tinged with vulnerability. For the first time in what felt like hours, someone was acknowledging her struggle, not with arrogance or distraction, but with genuine compassion. She let him help her sit in the wheelchair, her trembling hands clutching the handles as he guided her carefully toward a less crowded area of the terminal. Each bump smoothed, each supportive word, restored a flicker of hope and dignity she hadn't realized had dimmed so much. As she was assisted, her gaze involuntarily flicked toward Nathan and Vanessa. Nathan's expression remained one of detached concern, filtered through a lens of self-interest and distraction. Vanessa, nearby, maintained her poised, calculating demeanor, oblivious or perhaps deliberately indifferent to the woman suffering just feet away. The contrast was stark. Here was true care and empathy offered freely, versus the cold neglect of those who should have been her pillars of support. For a brief moment, Lila allowed herself to breathe, to accept the kindness of strangers. Their simple, selfless actions reminded her that genuine concern and humanity still existed, even when those closest to her failed. It was a temporary reprieve, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone, and that hope could still persist amid betrayal. Lila Morgan finally arrived at the gate, her arms trembling and her body slick with sweat from the grueling crawl, her face pale but resolute. Passengers and airport staff paused mid-step, drawn by the sight of a heavily pregnant woman, clearly exhausted yet refusing to remain silent. Gathering every ounce of strength, Lila wheeled herself upright and faced Nathan Pierce, who had finally noticed her presence but only now realized the severity of the situation. "Do you see what you've done?" Lila's voice, though strained, rang clear across the terminal. Her words carried the weight of betrayal and fury. I was crawling through this airport while you were busy on your calls, letting Vanessa steal my wheelchair, ignoring my pain and the danger to our child. Gasps echoed from nearby travelers. Staff members exchanged glances, some murmuring in disbelief as the confrontation unfolded. Nathan's face drained of color, his usual arrogance faltering under the weight of public scrutiny. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat, lost beneath the intensity of Lila's righteous indignation. The crowd's attention amplified his humiliation, forcing him into an uncharacteristic silence. Vanessa Moore, standing a few feet away, reacted instantly, her perfectly maintained composure cracking. "That's not fair," she snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. Yet even her anger couldn't reclaim control of the narrative, as the onlooker's eyes shifted from her poised posture to the raw, undeniable truth in Lila's exposure. For the first time, Nathan and Vanessa were confronted not in private but in a space teeming with witnesses, the consequences of their selfishness on full display. Lila's bravery, her refusal to remain a victim, transformed the terminal into a stage where the betrayal, arrogance, and cruelty of the millionaire and his mistress were laid bare, leaving both men and spectators stunned. After the confrontation, Lila Morgan slumped into a nearby chair, her body shaking from exhaustion and the adrenaline of the encounter. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unrelenting, each drop a mix of anger, pain, and the crushing weight of betrayal. Her chest heaved as she struggled to regulate her breath, feeling the raw physical and emotional toll of crawling across the airport, only to face her husband's and Vanessa's cruelty. Anger surged within her, sharp and consuming. She thought of Nathan Pierce, absorbed in his own ego and oblivious to the danger she had endured, and Vanessa Moore, whose calculated manipulation had left her stranded and humiliated. Yet, beneath the fury, a steady current of resilience persisted. Lila recognized her own strength, the courage it had taken to reach the gate and speak the truth in front of strangers. The humiliation she endured could not strip away her dignity, she had claimed her voice when it mattered most. Through the tears, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. Each pang of pain reminded her that she had survived not just physically, but emotionally. The ordeal, terrifying and degrading as it had been, showcased her determination and inner fortitude. Passengers and staff offered quiet, empathetic glances, acknowledging her ordeal without intrusion, reinforcing that compassion still existed in the world. In that vulnerable, overwhelming moment, Lila processed the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Heartache mingled with empowerment, and despair slowly transformed into clarity. She knew she had faced cruelty and emerged stronger, her resilience shining through even in her most raw, exposed state. Lila Morgan sat upright, wiping away the last of her tears, her mind sharpening with clarity. The chaos of the terminal and the humiliation she had endured had ignited a fire within her, a determination not to remain a victim any longer. She reached for her phone, fingers trembling but resolute, and began dialing the airport authorities, determined to report both the theft of her wheelchair and the blatant neglect she had suffered at the hands of Nathan Pierce and Vanessa Moore. Her voice, though still tinged with exhaustion, carried authority as she recounted the events, the wheelchair stolen under false pretenses, her struggle crawling through the terminal, Nathan's indifference, and Vanessa's manipulation. Each word she spoke reinforced her reclaiming of power, her refusal to allow her vulnerability to be exploited or dismissed. Airport staff immediately sprang into action, taking statements, reviewing security footage, and confirming the witnesses who had observed the ordeal. Lila's courage inspired immediate respect. For the first time, she saw the wheels of justice beginning to turn in her favor. Beyond reporting the incident, Lila began planning her next steps strategically. She called her lawyer to discuss legal action, insurance implications, and ensuring her safety and that of her unborn child. Each conversation reinforced her sense of control and empowerment. She made arrangements for a safer travel plan, requested additional support from airport staff, and considered security measures to prevent any future harassment. In this pivotal moment, Lila transformed fear and humiliation into decisive action. She understood that protecting herself and her baby required more than endurance, it demanded initiative, courage, and the refusal to tolerate abuse. The crawling, the pain, and the betrayal had forged a new version of Lila Morgan, vigilant, empowered, and ready to reclaim her life on her own terms. Lila Morgan took a deep, steadying breath as she left the terminal, her steps deliberate and strong despite the lingering ache in her body. Each stride was a declaration: she would no longer be subject to Nathan Pierce's selfishness or Vanessa Moore's manipulations. The ordeal had stripped away any illusions, leaving her with clarity and a renewed sense of purpose. She had survived humiliation, pain, and betrayal, and emerged stronger for it. News of the incident quickly spread through airport channels and social media, amplifying the consequences for Nathan and Vanessa. Security footage and eyewitness accounts corroborated Lila's report, exposing the millionaire's neglect and the mistress's deliberate interference. Nathan faced immediate public backlash, questions from authorities, and potential legal ramifications. Vanessa's carefully maintained image crumbled as the story revealed her manipulations and callousness. For Lila, witnessing their downfall was not revenge, it was a natural consequence of their choices, a confirmation that her courage and resilience had shifted the balance of power. Turning her attention forward, Lila focused on her pregnancy, embracing the life growing inside her with renewed dedication and love. She made plans for a supportive home environment, surrounded by family and friends who respected and cared for her. Each decision she made was guided by self-respect, empowerment, and the promise of a safer, more fulfilling future. As she stepped out of the airport and into a waiting car, the sun catching her face, Lila felt a sense of liberation she had never known. She had endured a nightmare yet emerged unbroken, her dignity intact. The toxic ties of the past were behind her. Ahead lay a life defined not by betrayal, but by resilience, independence, and the unwavering determination to protect herself and her child. Lila Morgan was no longer a victim, she was a force, ready to embrace her new beginning.